So now let's look at colors that are applied to yarn after it's been spun, whether by me or someone else. And we're going to revisit two hand spun yarns dyed by me recently that I've showed off in recent videos. And then we'll look at some yarn dyed by people who do this for a living. So we saw this. This is a commercial yarn that I dyed with acid dyes, and it is it's blotchier than I like. So I'm going to over dye it in black. Uh, but one of the ways you could get blotches like this if you wanted them, which, it turns out I did not, is again to lay the skeins in a pan and just paint across them with different colors in different concentrations, just like was done with the top that I showed. And then we saw this skein recently. This is a silk hand spun that on which I used ice dyes, and I didn't do anything to get these splotches of color. The melting of the ice and how it made the powder hit this more pre-mordanted silk yarn is what causes these bands of colors. So this skein I was really happy with, and I'm really looking forward to trying out more ice dyeing on my hand spun. The last example I want to show you is, again, my hand spun, and I applied the color after I spun the yarn. And I'm reasonably certain, again, this was a long time ago, that what I did on this alpaca handspun is I probably dyed the gold color, the base color first, and then I laid it out in a pan and just kind of splotched it with some greens and some rust colors, etc. Now, again, in the skein, we're seeing exactly where the green hit every single time because it's kind of a big splotch. But once this is turned into a single strand of yarn at a time, weaving up or knitting up this yarn, the green will be much less concentrated. And my hope is that it'll just give a kind of overall surface interest to the finished fabric. Okay, so now for some commercially dyed yarns. And I want to start with, and these are all made, I'm reasonably certain these are all made by small-ish, not necessarily indie dyers, but smaller companies, as opposed to the big yarn companies. So my first example here is a tonally dyed, this is a bamboo yarn by Theodora's Pearls, who is local here in Colorado. You can see that there's a lot of interest going on here, but everything's staying in the purple family. It's a pure purple yarn, which is great. And I love purple, and I love this color. And I love what she did with the just very subtle variations in tone. And there's a spot here where there's a little more reddish purple as opposed to the bluish purple of the rest of the skein. So the fabric this creates will have really subtle changes. Now, the same day I bought this purple, when I was at my local yarn shop, I also bought this skein to coordinate with it. And this is the same dyer. And this is a very similar purple to the tonally dyed skein. But you can also see that she either painted or dip dyed so that one end is purple, one end is this bright yellow, and then near the middle, the colors shade into each other. So I haven't quite decided yet what I'm going to do with this. My original plan of weaving it into an assigned pooling weave, which I've never tried before and I'm not sure even is a thing, is probably not going to work with these colors. I am probably going to knit them into a Mobius shoulder wrap because the color changes are just going to be exquisite. But we'll see. But anyway, these are two ways. And again, this was dyed across the skein, just like the top that we looked at before. Again, the way the colors applied on yarn is really important and can give you more or fewer choices on how to work with those colors when the time comes. Okay, next I've got Ushatita Fiber Art Merino Singles. This is a colorway. This is made in the Netherlands. This is the colorway doesn't have a name. The yarn base is called Owl. And this is mostly an off-white skein with speckles applied to it in greater or lesser concentrations. And again, once you lay it flat, you can see how the dyer applied the color. It is a super wash. So I bought it to experiment with. I want to see how it weaves up. I have a clear idea of how it's going to knit up into a fabric that has just these patches where you suddenly see the speckles. But I'm not sure how it's going to knit up, and that's always a fun experiment. Its sister, bought on the same day, and shockingly, not the same color. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm branching out. Who knows? Could be anything here. This is a Plucky Knitter colorway, and it is on it's on her Legacy Sport base, and the colorway is called Full Bloom. This is non-superwash Shaniko wool, and again, you can see that the dyer chose to lay out the yarn in a pan, paint certain sections, and then speckle other sections. And because this is a non-superwash wool, when I weave with it and then finish the woven fabric, wet finish the woven fabric, something fun is likely to happen with the woven fabric in a way that you don't really see with knitted fabric, not as much, just because there tends to be a little more space in a woven fabric for the yarns to fluff up and collide into each other. The last example was specifically dyed for what are called assigned pooling knitting patterns. And the dyer here is called A Chick That Knits, and the colorway is Heart of a Dreamer. If you've never seen an applied pooling knitting project, look for them. Google them, look for them on Ravelry. They're amazing because it tends to be just plain stockinette fabric until you hit the spot where the colors change, and then you do some kind of cluster stitch that really pops out. And so the cluster stitches happen randomly, and it's delicious. So this skein is different from this purple and yellow skein. I'm going to guess that what the dyer did was wrap this section very tightly with a resist, dyed the rest of the skein in this bluey, purpley, periwinkly kind of color, and then hand painted this section for the assigned pooling. You will often see yarns that are done this way. I mean, honestly, this yarn is kind of done that way. But on this yarn, the colors, the color changes aren't long enough. What you need is a stretch that will make about 20 stitches in the different color for an assigned pooling pattern. So this is probably going to become a small wrap or something, because I love these colors. So again, figuring out how the color works, it can help you decide how you're going to use the yarn in your finished project. It is much more common for dyers to paint across the skein, like they've done in all these examples, than, for instance, to try and change colors around the skein. For various technical reasons, that's just less common and doesn't produce as much drama, you might say. But thinking about how the colors lay out in a skein can give you some really helpful clues in how to use that yarn. A final note, and then we'll call it quits for this weekend, is thinking about how stuff looks in knitted fabric versus woven fabric. In knitted fabric, 99% of the time, you're only seeing one strand of the colors at a time. You look at the stitch and you see the little V's, and it's just one strand of yarn, unless you have chosen to combine two different colors of yarn or etc. But in woven fabric, you're interlacing warp threads that go down the loom with your weft threads that go across the loom. And so you're seeing two strands of color, two strands of yarn interact with each other, and that changes everything. It is, you almost can't believe it's the same yarn when you see a knitted or crocheted swatch versus a woven swatch. And again, that's a big part of the fun.